This week in news, we talk about the FTC trial. Extra, extra, hear all about it. Hey guys, and welcome to the podcast that's no longer lonely. No longer lonely. I'm the Dean of Games, the Dean Slater on all platforms, and joining me today from Twitches and this podcast's, for that matter, Graveyard, Gavin.
Hola.
So how you been doing? You were on quite a sabbatical.
Until recently struggling.
Yeah. Aren't we all, though? Aren't we all?
And in some ways still struggling.
Yeah, well.
Struggling in new ways.
Listen, I'm not sure if there's a therapist in this world that can help you with that.
Yeah, probably. At least I'm not like my buddy Mills, whose therapist ghosted him.
Oh, really? That's hilarious.
Yeah, he had a therapist, and he had I think 5 or 6 sessions, and then never heard from the therapist ever again.
Damn. Well, I am doing pretty well. I have not been for a hot second. We had to fix our refrigerator. We had to fix our oven. We had to fix not oven. We had to fix our dryer. We still kind of have to fix our AC, but that's a whole other thing. But at least it's functioning for the most part. I have a parasite living in my house now, but another story. Nothing to say to that?
Nah, I am a parasite.
And I'm going for a promotion, and who knows if I'm going to get that or not. My history says no, because I've got quite the extensive history of losing out promotions. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. This is Extra Extra, your weekly gaming news podcast covering the news leading up to... Go the fuck away, thank you. Well, it was supposed to be Thursday, but things happened, so it's gonna be Sunday, July 2nd. Holy shit, it's July 2023. And if you like us, you can go to patreon.com/thebriefingroom. Let's get to some news. And that news is the FTC versus Microsoft. So, here's the deal. We're going to focus mostly on the FTC side of it. There's going to be some other interesting things I found, but it is FTC v. Microsoft, meaning the FTC has the burden of proof. They're the ones that are suing. And this is for people keep pointing out this is for a preliminary injunction. So a lot of people are saying, and I'll get more deep into it, but a lot of people are saying that because it's a preliminary injunction and not the actual ruling, that there's less of a burden but that's not necessarily true. But again, we'll get into that in our discussion. So the FTC went all in on console foreclosure theory, which is interesting because console foreclosure theory has failed for every regulatory body, including the Consumer Market Authority, or I think that's what it's called, the CMA for the UK, is the only one that has blocked the acquisition, and they had to give up console foreclosure theory to do that. So that has failed every regulatory body. In order to try to make their case, the FTC spent a lot of time making it look like Switch, PC, and mobile aren't in the market. Gavin, anytime you have any questions, you can just hop in. This is pretty much the only thing we have this week, so if you have a question, we can answer the question.
Gotcha.
They tried to focus on only the US market. And then something interesting about all those proceedings are that they shared a old Matt Booty email. This is from December 17th, 2019. And it says, and it's Matt Booty to Tim Stewart. And I forget what position Tim Stewart has at Microsoft. But Matt Booty says, thanks for sharing. A lot to digest here. We'll read it in detail. A different view to the general view below might be that we, Microsoft, are in a very unique position to be able to go spin Sony out of business. If we think that if video game content matters in 10 years, we might look back and say totally would have been worth it to lose $2 billion or $3 billion in 2020 to avoid a situation where Tencent, Google, Amazon, or even Sony have become the Disney of games and own the most valuable content. For example, is practically impossible for anyone to start a new video game streaming service at scale at this point. What content you base it on? Things like Hulu and CBS All Access will be trivial players in the space. In games, Google is 3 to 4 years away from being able to have a studio up and running. And keep in mind, this was before Google shut down Stadia. Amazon has shown no ability to execute on game content. Amazon has released 3 games at this point now. Content is the one moat that we have in terms of a catalog that runs on current devices and capable to create new. Sony is really the only other player that could compete with Game Pass, and we have a 2-year and 10 million sub lead. If we reverse course on day and date, it's going to be hard to convince folks that things like Mixer or xCloud have a much chance of surviving scrutiny either. A lot of places focused in on that spin Sony out of business, which is interesting to me, at least, because we all knew that Microsoft could spin Sony out of business. It's not something that's being questioned. In this case isn't even about Sony either, which we'll bring up later. The FTC isn't supposed to be protecting Sony. But I do think it's interesting them talking about, the cloud and how it's hard to start cloud at the level it needs to be started at, and how Google and Amazon are still farther away from it than they are. That part of the email could be damning. Because again, what the CMA blocked it on was based on cloud streaming. But FTC didn't focus on cloud. They focused on console foreclosure. So that's not going to work here in this case. Because, spoiler alert, they don't come back to cloud until like their closing arguments, and by then it's like late. So that's my little section on console foreclosure. Then they brought in their personal economist, the FTC economist, Robin Lee. And he gave two console markets, high performance and just general market. Did not include Nintendo in the markets. Dodged questions on whether he included non-Activision games. Specifically, he was asked about FIFA and Madden, and he dodged questions of whether he looked at FIFA or Madden, which are EA. Now, this part was a little confusing. I think I understand what's being said here, but just to be safe, keep in mind, this part confused me a little bit. So he said 8.9% of PlayStation COD gamers would switch to Xbox based on the high performance model. He did not analyze for partial foreclosure. He did not analyze for effect on cloud, foreclosure on cloud. The foreclosure model uses global data, which is interesting because, again, they're trying to say it's only US. They were trying to focus on the US market. So the fact that the foreclosure model uses global data is interesting. The foreclosure model also uses the current generation of console data. We're in Generation 9, so PS5, Xbox Series S and X. It uses their data. The share model, which that he used US data, but used Generation 8 data, so PlayStation 4 and Xbox One. And then he said, here's the part I was referring to. He had said 8.9% of COD gamers would switch to Xbox. He said 20% of all COD gamers, is what I understand, would get an Xbox in foreclosure. So I'm guessing he's saying that, 11%, for PC? Because it's really only on PlayStation, PC, and Xbox. But he turns out this number was an input and not the result of a model. Meaning it wasn't, 2 plus 2 equals 4. It wasn't the equals part. It was, it was one of the twos. So he was trying to get he was trying to specifically get a result. And kept putting in numbers until he got that result. And 20% is that result. Because it was then revealed through the cross-examination and everything that if less than 20% of COD gamers switch to Xbox, foreclosure is unprofitable. They have to get 1/5 of all COD players to switch, otherwise they lose money by taking it off other locations. So at that point, there were obviously, this is very much cliff notes and everything. And shout out to stenographers. Man, just doing like the cliff notes highlights. Man, I can't imagine actually having to type everything out. Like, I know they have, codes and stuff that they use to help, but I could not imagine having to do that for a living. So, much respect to the stenographers out there. So then, Microsoft brought in their economist, Dr. Elizabeth Bailey, in which her initial statement is, Call of Duty is not essential, critical, must-have, or uniquely important. She pointed out that Lee did not look at mobile for his data, and said that Xbox has 0.3% of market. Mobile market specifically is what she's talking about. And their percentage in the mobile market will grow to 3.8 after the acquisition. As far as, whether the market should be considered US, she argues products and brands are the same worldwide, which is mostly true. I can think of a couple things where they changed their name going to another country. I'm drawing a blank on a business at the moment, but one thing I can think of is Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. In parts of the UK are called Teenage Mutant Hero Turtles, because ninjas are forbidden, I guess. But anyway, so there are times where products and brands are not the same worldwide, but for the most part they are. So that's, they're not getting into the nitty-gritty, like nitpicky things like I do. Steam and Nintendo both grew after losing Call of Duty. Nintendo hasn't had Call of Duty since the Wii. And then Steam had an issue for a while. I don't know if they actually ever resolved that or not, but Steam had an issue with Call of Duty for a little bit. And they grew despite not having a Call of Duty. Then she showed a chart of games that are both on Xbox and Switch, which is a counter to Robin Lee's definition of Nintendo not being considered in market because they are so far behind. And on that list, the top 15 PlayStation and Xbox games are also on PC, to argue that PCs should be included in the market. And she also said that many gamers also have PCs. Having console does not mean you don't have a PC. Then another economist for Microsoft came on, Professor Carlton. I'm drawing a blank on his first name. Apologies about that. He was given quite the runaround by the FTC, to the point where the FTC had to intervene and tell the FTC, hey, what's your point? What are you trying to get to? He basically, his testimony didn't really go very far, from what I've been reading, because he was only asked to prove Lee's findings false. But he didn't read any extra contracts or agreements, that were made to help alleviate concerns. And then we got some testimonials, which I think will actually have an out. God damn it. My mouse is not working quite right, so apologies if I'm struggling a little bit. So first up, CEO of Activision Blizzard King, Bobby Kotick. He said developers would never release a degraded version of the game. He personally is averse to multi-game subscription services such as PlayStation Plus and Game Pass and all that fun stuff. They have experimented with, but are not interested in streaming services. And said that if there is no deal, there is no COD on streaming services because obviously, as I have mentioned on this podcast in the past, I personally am only in favor of this to get Bobby Kotick out because Bobby Kotick would not leave otherwise. This is the only way to get him out of hopefully the whole industry, but definitely to get him out of Activision Blizzard King. And so it would make sense if the deal goes through. He no longer, his averseness and lack of interest in streaming services would be ignored because he wouldn't be involved anymore. So, then the other testimonial that I thought was interesting and could have a massive impact is the head of Xbox Creator Experience, Sarah Bond. And she had this to say, that cloud is a feature/delivery system for Xbox. Now, people have mentioned that in previous testimonies, she said that they wanted cloud to be its own thing, and they have been working on a dedicated cloud SKU. But in this testimony, keep in mind, they delayed that dedicated cloud SKU due to pricing issues. And that was before, that was when all of these regulatory bodies started actually looking into things. So the initial testimony would be different in that case, but that is neither here nor there. And it was revealed that xCloud is not profitable because it's used mostly to try a game before purchase, and it is expensive to install Xbox specific hardware in data centers. And then for that, that expense to then only be used for trying out games. There were various leaks that have come out from this whole thing. A couple highlights. First of all, PlayStation. Come on, guys. A lot was revealed about PlayStation because they redacted their document with Sharpie. So you could still see the lettering if you looked close enough. And all of the core records have all been digitized or whatever. So people are like, "Wait, what is that?" Oh, I can actually, if I zoom in close enough, I can actually see what's going on. And so they managed to figure some of this stuff out. Like Horizon Forbidden West and The Last of Us remake or whatever each cost, I don't know if it was Last of Us 2 or if it was Last of Us remake, but anyway, they each cost $200 million to make. Think about that.
Jesus.
Making games is expensive.
Yep.
1 million users have a PlayStation only play Call of Duty. And that players who spend more than 70% of time on Call of Duty play an average of 296 hours. Which is interesting. But, you consider, I'm sure that's not just PlayStation 5 because
Right.
relatively new console. I know it's been out for 3 years, but who's been able to buy it? Am I right? So I'm assuming that's a wider margin, but I do not have the data on that. So take that with a grain of salt. And then Call of Duty's revenue split was revealed because Microsoft, in that Sarah Bond testimony, she said that Xbox had to agree to a new revenue split to keep Call of Duty on Xbox when the new consoles all came out. And that, and then the FTC themselves leaked that it was 80-20. And it's like, come on, guys. There was something else. I could not find what it was, but the FTC apologized for revealing something else. I think it involved Nintendo revealing something about Nintendo, but I could not re-find that. But it's just like, come on, man. What are we... I can't, because I'm already going to go on a rant about what we're paying them for, but... Oh my god. So that's all that I've wrote about that. It should be noted, because I don't have it here, as I mentioned before, the FTC has burden of proof. They have to prove that it's more likely than not that this deal will hurt consumers. Not hurt PlayStation, hurt consumers. That's what antitrust lawsuits are about. It's not about whether they hurt other companies. It's whether they hurt consumers. Because competition keeps companies honest, or at least it should, unless all the companies agree to fuck us over, which they have. That's a whole other topic for a whole other day. So, their performance in that regard is bad. Do you have any, before I go into some of my notes, do you have anything about what you read or any questions?
No, I just love how stupid PlayStation was for using Sharpie. It's like the best part about all of this. Like, are you fucking kidding me?
Well, keep in mind, they've had several leaks before because they let someone hack into their database not once, but twice.
Yeah.
And not only steal information like, oh, hey, there's a screenplay for a Men in Black 21 Jump Street crossover. Well, I wonder what that's about. But also, hey, here's all the information on people that paid for PS Plus. So that's happened twice now, and it's like, good lord. Now, granted, I make the joke. Both those happened in the PS3 era, but they've had their issues.
Yeah.
So anyway, some of my notes. First of all, since we're on the topic of burden of proof, anyway, I don't think they met their burden of proof to prove that it was more likely than not that Xbox this would be a harm to consumers. Um,
Mhm.
and in fact, as I mentioned, they were so focused on something that has failed in, I believe, 13 other regulatory bodies. The console foreclosure theory failed in 13 other regulatory bodies. Why? Why would you go all in on that?
Right.
What? Keep in mind, everyone. Keep in mind, the FTC is a government body. All of their
Mhm.
research, all of the things they did here that were so bad. As I mentioned, it was a terrible performance. That came out of your money. You paid for this. It'd be one thing if it was a good try, but they just didn't have enough. This was so bad, and it starts from the very beginning. About the console, the console foreclosure theory, just has not worked. There's only one regulatory body that has successfully blocked so far. Go with what they did, which is focusing on cloud. Why the fuck didn't they focus on? I am embarrassed for them.
Right.
Secondly, uh, as I mentioned at the top, a lot of people are saying, well, this is only for a preliminary injunction. Uh, they don't have as much, quote, as much burden to, prove it because that's what the regular court case will be for. No, the reason that this was so in depth and why it's taken so long is because if they don't get this preliminary injunction, the deal's going through. And that's why the judge was so focused on getting all of the facts, because this is it. This is the battle. It's been listed as a preliminary injunction, but this is the actual battle. Um. Uh. Let's see. Oh. Something that was funny is during cross examination, um, they asked Robin Lee, the FTC's economist, they asked him about uh, PlayStation CEO Jim Ryan saying that they considered Nintendo a rival. During cross examination, they asked him about it, and he had this to say, quote of all time, hilarious. Rival means many things. Still trying to dismiss Nintendo for his market definition, but here he is, the the company that's on his side just called Nintendo a rival and trying to keep his market definition. He's like, well, rival means many things. It could be anything. They could be talking about whatever. Oh, they're both Japanese companies. Maybe it's just a rivalry for whoever's most Japanese. Uh, but then later, keep in mind, again, he does not want to, his market definition does not include Nintendo. So, during one of the questions, his answer was, there are three major players in the console market. So even that was just off the cuff. Even off the cuff, he does not believe his own market definition because he said there are three players in the console market. Oh my goodness. Unless he's talking about the KFC console.
I forgot that was a thing.
Yeah. Maybe that's what he was talking about. He was talking about the KF console.
Yeah.
He was like, man, can't wait to fry those chicken while I play games. Uh, so I kind of touched on it before. Um, uh, but like I said, Lee dodged questions of, I said he dodged questions regarding whether he included non-Activision games. There were a couple times where he was asked yes or no questions, and instead of saying yes or no, he tried to give an explanation.
Hmm.
And then, like I said, Professor Carlton was given the runaround and only did what he was asked to do. He didn't do anything extra. And as a result, I think they're going to throw out, the court will throw out both Professor Carlton and Lee's testimonies, which still leaves Dr. Elizabeth Bailey's testimony.
Yeah.
She did her research. She was calm. She joked around, which you don't really think of in a court case, but you can have tasteful fun in a court case. Her performance was very stellar. Whether you agree with their data or not, half of half of the battle is to look composed, and
Hmm.
neither Professor Carlton nor Lee were composed. But Bailey was. So shout out to her for staying composed. Um, because lawyers will try to scare you. And if you get scared, then you start saying things, whether you believe them or not. But it puts you on the back foot. And so I find law fascinating. Not fascinating enough to do it, but. And then another thing I wanted to mention was the importance of Bobby Kodik's statements. Um, as I mentioned, he said he has an aversion to multi-game subscription services. And he is not interested in streaming services. And if no deal, no COD. Uh, you know, which is interesting and important because uh, allegedly the proposed deal to Sony is that Call of Duty will be on PlayStation Plus if the deal goes through. It would not be on PS Plus otherwise. If the deal doesn't go through, it would not be on PS Plus. I'm sure PlayStation doesn't care either way, but that will be a key to the decision. The fact that it actually would be available, it would not be available otherwise. That could be a key. Also, with the streaming services, they have deals with Nvidia. They have deals with a bunch of cloud services that I didn't even know existed. I've never even heard of. They have deals with them to bring Call of Duty to those platforms. Call of Duty would not be on those streaming services if the deal doesn't go through. So that actually does help the cloud market as well. Now, you can obviously argue, well, if Microsoft's the biggest cloud player, even if they're offering, Call of Duty on the other streaming services, there's arguments to be made about whether that's anti-competitive or not. But the fact of the matter is, they wouldn't exist if the deal didn't exist. And of course, they're testifying under oath, but there could be a lot of things where it's like, half truths,
Yeah.
But because who knows? Maybe the deal doesn't go through, and maybe Call of Duty appears on a streaming service anyway. Who's to say? But he was pretty adamant that he has no interest in that. So I do think that's interesting. And then I kind of mentioned it before, but about the importance of Sarah Bond's testimony. But the fact that cloud isn't profitable for them is interesting. Because obviously, her testimony, there had to be data to go along with that testimony. That was more than likely redacted. But there had to be data with her testimony, which means that they can see the profit of xCloud. And it, again, who knows with all this? I can't imagine they're lying too much. I doubt they're lying really, because perjury is pretty serious offense. But xCloud isn't profitable. How does that affect the appeal to the CMA later? Because Xbox is appealing that block. So how does that affect that? They're them saying that cloud is, it's unfair to, cloud gamers because, that market's so new or whatever, is their excuse was. If it's not profitable and they decide that it's just a feature, which honestly, them delaying and pushing back their cloud device kind of makes it seem like they are just now going to treat it as a feature, and that they probably didn't want it to be a feature way back when, but they just cannot find a way of, because again, they pushed it back due to pricing issues. They could not sell it at a low enough price for it to still be profitable and for people to buy it. That price point of people being interested and it being profitable just never lined up, which is why they pushed it back. And so, it could be that that's actually what happened. Her previous testimony was different because back in the day, they were looking at actually making it a separate service, but realized it can't be done. And that might affect the CMA because, like I said, they blocked on the basis of cloud. But if they can prove here that cloud is just a feature delivery system, and not something they're planning on making its own thing, maybe they can prove it with the appeal later. But it was very clear in this court case that this was a political play, probably from Lena. Is that her name? I think it's Lena Khan. Yeah, that's what it looks like. Yes, she's the FTC chair. So she, I have a feeling it's a political play by her, because as we all know, the elections are not terribly far away, which, ugh, but um, the the case was very much like they kept talking about, Sony. They kept talking about all these different companies, and at one point the FTC judge even corrected them and was like, "This isn't about Sony. This is about the consumers."
Mhm.
So it does feel like they definitely, uh, it's definitely feels like a little bit of a reach to to try to make a play for politics. That kind of is what the CMA feels like too, because every when the European Union passed the acquisition, the CMA put out just a massive tweet thread talking about how the European Union was wrong. It's like, why do you need to do that? Why can't you just stand by what you said? Why do you have to attack another thing? And I have a feeling it's because that was a political play as well. You can make the argument all you want that whether or not this is good or not. And that's a very fair argument. But so far, it's looking like there's nothing uh, about it being anti-consumer. Because, as I mentioned, uh, 13 regulatory bodies have ruled already, I believe is the number, and 12 of them were passing. And the FTC looks like it's going to be a pass, and the CMA is being appealed. So, say what you will, the deal looks like it's going through, and financial analysts have been saying it's going to go through for a while, and you know. Financial analysts and all these legal people, they know much more than me. I'm just some stupid kid that talks too much, So, that's it for me. Uh, got anything to add to any of that?
Not really. You just sort of did your homework on everything.
Yeah. Did you learn something?
I learned a lot.
Uh, do
Don't
you know?
trust billion-dollar corporations.
Oh, yeah. That goes without saying, but I mean, to be fair, that includes Sony too, which is what the FTC was trying to protect with Sony.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, fuck capitalism. You know, if there's a lesson to be learned here, fuck capitalism.
Yeah.
CEOs make 358 times what we make, what normal, average people make. Think about that. Your boss's 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 boss makes 358 times what you make. How does that make you feel? You're out here struggling, and they're like, huh, look, I've got $30 here. I might as well wipe my ass with it. Anyway, it is what it is. If you liked or even if you didn't like this podcast, make sure to do all of the things, like hitting the like button and the subscribe button and the bell at the XofPlays on YouTube, or giving it a high rating on whatever podcast service you use so you can find like-minded people. Be sure to tell people about the show. Word of mouth is the best way to help us grow, and I brought it up before, but on patreon.com/thebriefingroom, you can financially support the show and get cool rewards as well. Gavin just watched an old YouTube video from when I was in high school.
I did.
It was fun. Except for when I looked at it and I saw that it was like 15 years ago. And then I was like, oh, that's sad. But that's all from us. Take care.